That concludes our debate. We now have an oral question on glyphosate and authorization procedures. It's the next item on our agenda. So, whilst the Commission takes its seats, I'd like to hear from the author of the question, Mrs. Dalli, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, Commissioner. Glyphosate, what we're speaking today about, and the oral question that we are presenting, and the topic that it is focusing on. Today, it is the world's most used herbicide, and obviously the European Union is no exception to this. The carcinogenity and the genotoxicity of the substance are confirmed by certain studies, but denied by others. Fact is that it is undeniable that there are serious doubts as to the substance's safety. The Commission keeps on insisting that it arrives to its decisions based on two things: scientific evidence and the rule of law. The issue we are dealing with today goes further. It is about lack of transparency. It is about questionable scientific reliability and scientific independence. It is about losing public trust and about corporate giants overstepping their authority. And yes, transparency matters. The glyphosate hazard classification process of the European Commission and its two agencies, EFSA and ECHA, appears to be a good example of how lack of transparency regarding the scientific evidence that underlies important public health decisions can end up eroding public trust and raise serious concerns. Independent analysis indicates serious flaws in the EFSA and ECHA safety assessments, namely 8 instances where increases in tumours as a response following glyphosate exposure were not included in the assessment by either agency. In March 2015, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, which forms part of the World Health Organization, said that glyphosate was probably carcinogenic to humans. On the other hand, the Commission is claiming that ECHA and EFSA concluded that the available scientific evidence did not meet the criteria to classify glyphosate as a carcinogen, as a mutagen, or as a toxic for reproduction. No wonder that questions and doubts still do exist. Is it too extreme to imagine that there can be an expert panel financed by corporate giants who would conclude that available data will not support the conclusion that glyphosate is a probable human carcinogen? How can we be sure of the validity of the conclusions about the safety or otherwise of glyphosate when there is lack of transparency? When it is publicly revealed by the latest US court cases that the scientific data provided by the company experts was falsified? We have to take a strong stand on this issue. Until we know for certain that glyphosate is safe for our citizens and the environment, we cannot allow the substance to be freely sold in the EU market. And this is why we are presenting this oral question. We want to understand what steps the Commission is taking to make sure that the decision on the renewal of glyphosate is based on credible and independent scientific findings. We want the Commission to recommend ECHA and EFSA to critically revise the validity of the current studies and not to propose the approval of glyphosate as long as the scientific uncertainties have not been clarified. And we require the Commission to rapidly ensure an independent review on the classification of glyphosate in relation to hormone disruption, genotoxicity and carcinogenity. Finally, we want the Commission to promote and support the agriculture sector so that our farmers can move towards glyphosate-free agriculture and towards alternative, sustainable and cost-efficient solutions for pest management. We asked precise questions on behalf of the Environment Committee to the Commission, and we are looking forward to precise, detailed answers. Ultimately, people's right to health and a healthy environment should be our priority at all times. Thank you, Chair.
Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam. Now, to you, Commissioner. Commissioner Andriukaitis, please.
Madam President, honourable members, I am pleased to attend this plenary session to talk about a substance which has generated a great deal of interest and debate, namely glyphosate. Madam President, I hope that you will allow me a bit of time to insist on this point, as it was repeatedly requested by various members of this House who asked for the debate today. And of course, I heard a little bit different questions compared to those which I received in written. I believe it is of utmost importance to reply as precisely as possible to the specific questions raised by the honourable members. On the chronology of events, as you know, glyphosate is the most frequently used active substance in herbicide products in Europe, as it is one of the national market since 1970s already. It was previously subject to national approval processes. Since 1st of July 2002, this substance has been approved for use at European Union level after a review assessment. It is currently under evolution as regards a possible renewal of its approval. This evolution is done following the procedures laid down in the EU legislation concerning pesticides. This is a very strict legislation which you wisely contributed to put in place. In April 2015, in accordance with the legislation, a comprehensive assessment of all available data was carried out by the rapporteur member state, Germany. This assessment included both studies that industry legally has submitted and independent peer-reviewed scientific literature. This assessment was then also peer-reviewed by all other European Union member states' bodies and the European Food Safety Authority. As you see, a lot of bodies together. An agency of the WHO, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, also carried out an assessment and concluded in March 2015 that glyphosate is probably carcinogenic to humans, after classification group 2A. This is why, taking into account public concern, I asked EFSA to ensure that the IARC assessment was fully considered in the EU peer review of glyphosate. In November 2015, EFSA concluded, in contrast to IARC, that glyphosate is unlikely to pose a carcinogenic hazard to humans. But the same conclusions was also reached by all but only regulatory agencies in European Union member states. 27 agencies conclude the same. In 2016-2017, the same conclusions were also reached by agencies in Japan, New Zealand, Canada, and Australia. Worldwide, a lot of agencies. In May 2016, the Joint Food and Agriculture Organization and WHO meeting on pesticide residues also reached the conclusions taking into account the work of IARC, which was only a first step in the WHO assessment. I would like to draw your attention. Let me remind you that even without mentioning tobacco, solar radiation, or processed meat, alcohol beverages are, for instance, classified by IARC in Group 1 as carcinogenic to humans, contrary to glyphosate. But only glyphosate is high on the agenda in public debates. Does it mean that I should label processed meat or alcohol beverages as carcinogens or even ban them? It's an open question. Of course, in 2016, the Commission discussed a possible renewal of the approval of glyphosate with the Member States, following the divergent opinions between, as I mentioned, IARC and EFSA, on the carcinogenic potential of glyphosate, and also between different Member States. The Commission took a cautious approach, also in light of public concerns, of legitimate public concerns. And we also use this precautionary approach. We therefore made a proposal to extend the expiry date of glyphosate until 31st of December 2017, at the latest, to enable the European Chemical Agency to deliver its opinion on the hazard properties of glyphosate based on proposal from the rapporteur member state, namely Germany. In parallel, in April 2016, your House adopted a resolution asking the renew glyphosate for 7 years. As always, the Commission was very attentive to this expression of the European Parliament position. We took good note for your support for a renewal of the approval based on scientific assessment conducted in the EU. Lastly, on 15th of March 2017, the Risk Assessment Committee of ECHA concluded that glyphosate is not be classified as carcinogenic, nor as mutagenic or toxic for reproduction. In recent weeks, various sources have reported on so-called Monsanto papers. First, the facts. According to the media reports and correspondence sent to the Commission, United States court ordered the release of documents following a freedom of access to document request. But you mentioned in your speech. And I will now turn to your first question. Honourable members, you rightly pointed at a very important aspect. In light of public concern to ensure credible and independent scientific findings. In this field, like in others, I heard and listened to public concerns, and many questions are legitimate, and I am happy to provide you once again with answers. From 2014, when I took office, I have indeed received a lot of letters, messages, emails concerning glyphosate, together with European initiative, Citizens' Initiative, registered this year in January, request for urine sample last year, and even Citizens' Monsanto Tribunal. It shows a real picture of different opinions and different concerns. We are working on this. For some people, glyphosate is a symbol of intensive agriculture and strongly linked to GMOs. This debate is broader than glyphosate, but this is why the need to maintain a strong scientific assessment in this context is crucial. We also always take very much into account public concerns. This is why we ask EFSA and ECHA to indicate which impact the allegations, if confirmed, would have on the agency's overall assessment and conclusions on glyphosate. Both ECHA and EFSA reached the same conclusions. EFSA confirmed that even if the allegations regarding ghostwriting proved to be true, there would be no impact on the overall assessment as presented in the EFSA conclusions on glyphosate. ECHA confirmed that the information contained in the so-called Monsanto papers did not have an impact on the overall assessment as presented in the draft opinion of the Committee of Risk Assessment on 15th of March 2017. This is because EU experts had access to the raw data and to the original study reports, and they produced their own and independent conclusions based on the original data and not on another interpretations of it. In contrast, the articles mentioned were study reviews summarizing or substantiating the industry position on glyphosate that had been presented elsewhere. These study reviews were known for all assessing bodies and are not new, as they were mentioned in the declarations of interest of the participating experts. In other words, the study reviews have limited weight in the overall scientific assessment of glyphosate and, I quote, would not normally on their own be sufficient for a conclusion to be reached on a harmonized classification. It's answers from scientific bodies. The statements of both agencies are available online since last week. Overall, there is Thus, broad convergence between the European and international community of scientists on the fact that glyphosate is not carcinogenic, keeping eyes on public opinions, on different views around the world. All agencies concluded in Japan, in Canada, in New Zealand, Australia, in EU, only one agency, IR, has different opinion. It's really a little bit strange to see that so many scientific bodies agreed, but we will ask once again to see how to move forward, keeping eyes on scientific-based arguments. While individual persons may continue to disagree with this overwhelming convergence of scientific opinions, this cannot put into question the robustness of our system, and we should proceed with a renewal of the approval of glyphosate, as there is no reason to doubt the evidence-based arguments of safety of the substance. Therefore, the Commission decided, in light of public concern, to propose a renewal for 10 years. In parallel, 3 very clear recommendations to Member States were adopted last year. First, ban the coformulant called tallow-amine from glyphosate-based products. Second, minimize the use in public parks, public playgrounds and gardens of speaking of glyphosate. And 3, be attentive about the pre-harvest use of glyphosate. Let me also recall that even if glyphosate is approved at EU level, it is within the responsibility of Member States to authorize plant protection products containing glyphosate at national level and decide on the conditions of use. And of course they have the right to ban, because it's about coformulants. The Commission is therefore not the only one to decide when it comes to pesticides. Now, on your second question on investigation, let me stress that in the case of you referred to, the Commission does not have any proof that the allegations are correct. I am not a lawyer, but I know that we have very thorough assessment. Let me turn now to your second question. I can confirm that the way in which data and information is provided to the regulatory authorities and shared with the public for consideration of the approval of substances will be examined in the context of the REFIT evaluation of the European Union pesticide legislation. Indeed, the Commission is specifically asking the contractor, external contractor, that will conduct an external study in the preparation of the REFIT evaluation to look into this issue. This is actually reflected in the terms of reference which are publicly available as everything we do. As the REFIT evaluation of the EU pesticide legislation and the fitness check of the general food law are still ongoing, it is a little bit too early to make assumptions or consider a different course of actions at this stage. However, I would like to stress that the outcome of the fitness check of the general food law will also be publicly available once completed, and the outcome of the REFIT evaluation of the EU pesticide legislation will be presented to this Parliament. In the meantime, I am aware that Parliament is preparing an own initiative report on the implementation of plant protection products regulation. The Commission will, of course, carefully examine this report and its conclusions once it is finalized, and will consider this during the preparation of the REFIT evaluation. Third, I would now turn to your third question. Let me start by first highlighting that the process of examining the claims made by companies to exclude the public release of certain information, of course, is directly managed by EFSA and Member States. Such claims are considered in conjunction with the rules outlined in the Plant Protection Products Regulation and relevant rulings of the European Court of Justice. In this context, the Court of Justice rulings of November 2016 in relation to the implementation of the Aarhus Convention in the EU concern 2 important issues. First, access to confidential information related to the manufacturer and detailed composition of substances, in this case concerning the original approval of glyphosate. And second, disclosure of studies on substances and formulated products submitted to member states in the context of product authorization. First, in the first ruling, the Court of Justice referred the case back to the General Court, and the proceedings before the court are still pending. As regards the protection of confidentiality and the access to information at issues in that case, the Commission is awaiting the outcome. And I can assure you that I welcome initiative to have more clarity in this field. We need more clarity, no doubt. In the second case, the Court of Justice defined information on emissions into the environment with regards to studies submitted for active substances in plant protection biocidal products. The Commission and Member States are currently assessing the consequences of this judgment. I would like to emphasize the following. First, at my request, the companies applying for the renewal of the approval of glyphosate made available to members of parliament and stakeholders the key studies underlying the assessment of glyphosate in a reading room. Second, in addition, EFSA provided members of parliament and stakeholders with access to raw data from a number of key studies following a request for access to documents. This access is on top of the extensive documentation that had already been made available as part of the standard procedures by EFSA during the peer review of glyphosate. Therefore, one can only conclude that there has been a particularly high level of transparency in the specific case of glyphosate in the light of public concern. I understand this might not be enough to some of you in this House, and I am also aware that a complaint is about to be lodged to the European Court of Justice. Once again, I can only welcome the increased clarity that the Court would give on this matter. First, let me now turn to your fourth and last question. I would like to stress that the Commission, through its research and innovation programs, such as the 7th Framework Programme and Horizon 2020, supports a broad body of research in plant protection to identify new low-risk products and biological control techniques. This is what I highlighted again last week in a very interesting conference in Parliament on biological low-risk pesticides. Let me stress again that in the 7th Framework Programme, over €100 million was invested by the European Union in cooperative research projects and coordination support actions in the area of plant protection, plant health, integrated pest management, and risk assessment and diagnostics. Furthermore, specifically in relation to alternatives to chemical herbicides, on a Horizon 2020 initiative supported by €7 million, European Union contribution is currently looking at strategies, tools, and technologies for sustainable weed management. So, as you can notice, a lot of money has been invested already in terms of research and development. With regard to sustainable plant protection more specifically, the need to find alternatives to traditional chemical solutions is also reflected in the Sustainable Use of Pesticide Directive, which aims at reducing the risks and impacts of pesticide use on human health and the environment, and at promoting the use of integrated pest management and of alternative approaches of techniques such as non-chemical alternatives to pesticides. The Commission audits Member States to monitor implementation of the directive and also encourages Member States to share best practices, identify challenges and ensure harmonization. The Commission is also undertaking several actions to increase the availability of low-risk products. These actions include the prioritization of the assessment for the renewal of potentially low-risk substances and the amendment of the low-risk criteria to facilitate their identification. President, honourable members, thank you for your attention.
Commissioner, thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Let me, before proceeding with the debate, just mention that we are behind schedule. at this pace we would not finish at 11, so I will strictly have to obey the time limits, and I'm seeking your understanding on that. Now we will proceed with the speakers for the political groups. First, Madame Dalli, for 2 minutes for the EPP.
Monsieur le Président,
President, Commissioner, colleagues, as you said, Commissioner, we have to take decisions on the basis of sound scientific data, not on just ideas. Obviously, this has become a political issue, as you said. We have to protect our citizens' health in general terms, but in particular that of users. We have a system for authorization of substances in place now, but if we don't like it, it's not a reason to attack it as we feel fit. We have to be able to trust this system so that we can ensure our citizens that decisions taken are in their interests. Obviously, I welcome today's debate because, as you said, for a year doubts have been expressed, and those doubts are ongoing for various reasons. First and foremost, different approaches by the agencies. Some base themselves on risk, others on dangers, and that gives rise to confusion, which unfortunately is ongoing. Now, I trust our system, Mr. Commissioner. As you stressed, the Parliament has adopted a stance based on consensus around a resolution last year. But given the lack of trust in the citizen, there is the fact that doubt exists, so we need to provide clarification. And I do hope that you will be able to go a little bit further in the responses you've started to provide us with on measures taken by the Commission in order to create better transparency in the decisions which the Commission takes, in order to regain the trust that some people have lost. Now, researchers have approached you. I would like to know how all of that was dealt with, and what have EFSA and ECHA done, or are they doing with the information? You stress that in many agencies around the world, it's emerging, or they are saying that there is no carcinogenic risk with the substance, but we need to push this further, and I do hope that we will be able to come up with economically and environmentally viable alternative solutions for the professionals. And again, I would like you to go further on that question and the measures for financing research.
Monsieur André.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Yes, thank you, President. Commissioner, well, thank you for your intervention. I know the hard work that you're doing in the Commission, and I'd like to thank you for it publicly here. But it's true that when it comes to glyphosate, the position that the Commission has taken to renew its authorization for 10 years doesn't seem in line with the current situation. In your intervention, you recalled that there is major controversy around this substance, in spite of the fact that many studies, as you say, suggested that glyphosate is not carcinogenic, but others are saying the opposite. Now, obviously, we have to make a choice. You as a commissioner, we here in the Parliament have to ensure that the scientific approach is a high quality one. You're not a scientist, nor am I, and we have to base ourselves on real research. But given the situation, I think not basing ourselves on the precautionary principle seems to show a lack of responsibility. I mean, you've mentioned the fears of people, and also the Monsanto papers, and we all know the revelations that have emerged from those. There was a court in California which had a look at the papers, and it seems, from what we've heard, that Monsanto received studies which showed that glyphosate could potentially be carcinogenic, and they knew that since 1999. So that's where all the controversy comes from. Now, for me, I'm concerned that there could be some kind of criminal act here, because if it were revealed that glyphosate was carcinogenic, then there would be major responsibilities. So I think we should go for the precautionary principle. In addition, as you expressly said, we have to take account of all scientific expertise on this subject and not only the expertise that's carried out by Commission agencies. We need to have access to all studies so that we have absolute transparency. And finally, I would urge you to prepare alternatives to this substance for our farmers if this did turn out to be carcinogenic, because if we do nothing, they will be the first victims of a system which holds them hostage.
From Mr. Hadjigeorgiou, would you accept it?
Κύριε Πρόεδρε, η μπλε κάρτα που είχα σηκώσει ήταν για ερώτημα.
Thank you very much indeed. In actual fact, the blue card was for the previous speaker. You didn't see me. I don't know whether it's too late now.
Do you accept the blue card from Mr. Hadjigeorgiou? Please go ahead now.
Έλεγα, κύριε Πρόεδρε,
President, I was telling you that my blue card was for the previous speaker, but you didn't see me. I think you could give them a possibility to answer now, because I didn't really understand the previous speaker's position. Were they in favour or against this substance we're discussing? So I would like some further clarification on that, please.
Thank you. Please go ahead with the reply. I'm sorry. It was to Madame Dalli. Okay. Madame Dalli, please.
Oui, mais écoutez, il me semble très clair dans les propos que j'ai...
Well, I think it was clear in what I said. The issue is not to be in favour or against. The issue is to know whether this product produces a danger to human health. And I'm waiting for scientists to give us a clear response so that I can carry out my role as an elected representative.
Mr. Piecha for a minute and a half.
Dziękuję bardzo, panie przewodniczący.
Thank you very much, President, Commissioner. Glyphosate has been used for many years as a herbicide, and it has been a controversial substance. There is an ongoing debate, and there are many unknown knowns, and there are many controversial and self-excluding reports on its toxicity, and emotions sometimes are more important than rational approach. Now, I appeal to you not to be emotional, but to stand back and look at the big picture, and let's look at the scientific facts, and then at the economic or social side of things. Obviously, the health of human beings is of utmost importance. But the latest study seemed to be pointing to a correlation of carcinogenity of glyphosate. Some of the MEPs are actually accusing the European agencies of manipulation of scientific data. And I'd like to plead with the Commissioner to monitor very closely the situation and also cooperate with the European authorities on food safety, for example. All the European agencies need to cooperate with the American Environmental Protection Agency in order to establish a system which would allow for data gathering, scientific data, and also to develop a modus operandi concerning the toxicity of this substance. So rational thought, scientific facts, and more transparency of European institutions.
Madame Rees, for 2 minutes for the ALDE group.
Thank you very much indeed, President. The glyphosate saga continues, and now the ball is in our court. 14 months after the vote on our resolution, which was already asking for it to be banned in specific circumstances. Study after study, agency after agency, and the experts have all come forward, but we still don't have clarity, and that's a euphemistic. In March, the Monsanto papers basically blew the US situation out of the water, and they've been worried about this since '99. This is a mutagen, and we've got plenty of evidence now, but the inquiry has to establish that. We want to continue to place our support in EFSA and the ECHA agency, and the Commission recalled this, but we all know that the member states as with the GMOs, are hiding their differences and shirking their responsibility. But we, are losing time, and the roadmap from the Commission has to be underpinned by a number of principles. The Commission has to make sure that the final decision is based on scientific studies which are entirely independent, not on biased papers provided by Monsanto or other companies. And in this transition phase, before December, it's vital that the Commission changes model. We now have to move towards a phasing out of this substance rather than reclassifying it or creating exemptions. The European agencies have also got to have the means to achieve their ambitions. The budget for EFSA is 4 times lower almost than the Medicines Agency, whereas food is the biggest outlay for European households. So that's what you should be doing, Commissioner. You probably won't do this, but given what you've told us this afternoon. You say that everything is known, all the factors are on the table, but the Monsanto papers don't change anything, you say. You're basically rejecting our appeals, and I think that's a real sorry state of affairs. And I'm concluding now. The evidence has to be made absolutely clear, and the principle of action should be the precautionary principle, Commissioner. Thank you.
GUE Group, Mrs. Konečná, for a minute and a half.
Předsedové, drazí kolegové.
President, colleagues, well, what's been happening in the Commission and EFSA over recent years with authorization is a total farce. It's unheard of. Now, time and time again, the European Parliament has expressed its views to the Commission, but the Commission hasn't respected that. Well, we've seen what's happening with Monsanto. We've seen the studies on glyphosate as well. And basically, EFSA has used us to support its position as well. But no one has ever seen these studies, not even the International Agency for Research on Cancer, which has described glyphosate as being potentially carcinogenic. Now, obviously, Monsanto has drawn up its own studies, signed by various different scientists as well. But for the past 17 years, Monsanto has been suspected of producing this carcinogenic product, one of its most important products. But EFSA and the Commission are saying nothing. The Parliament is discussing this once again. If the Commission does not look into the situation of Monsanto, I would like to set up a committee of inquiry into this. You need a further 20 minutes, Commissioner, to explain what's happening here.
Mr. Chair, if I understand the Commissioner very well, then everything is fine, everything is done properly, and we can just continue. That's more or less the summary of your 15-minute speech. And that is really not paying attention to the huge scientific debate that is ongoing on glyphosate from the 80s on, broader than only carcinogenicity, it's broader than that. But secondly, more important, it's ignoring the fact that the Monsanto papers show that Monsanto unduly was influencing studies that were being used also later on by EFSA. That is a concern. And the problem is that EFSA is saying, well, we use more studies that, for example, IARC didn't use, but we don't have access to it. So we don't know which studies have exactly been used by EFSA to come to those conclusions. It's lack of transparency, it's lack of trust in these organizations, and we see in the United States that there is undue influence of Monsanto. We want a good investigation of the Commission on this issue, otherwise we have to do it ourselves.
Thank you. I don't see the next speaker here. Oh, she's there. I'm sorry. I was looking for Mrs. Rees, but on a different number. So now for the EFDD for 2 minutes, Madam Reed.
Mr. President, the deadline for the reapproval of the use of glyphosate in the EU is rapidly approaching, and soon a decision must be made on this very important issue. Although I agree that the release of recent confidential documents disclosed to the public in the US are reason for concern, we are in the position that glyphosate is one of the few herbicides that our farmers have at their disposal, and compared to earlier products is safer. Glyphosate is the world's most widely used herbicide, and such products are also used in public and private gardens as well as in agriculture. However, as much as I would like to see herbicides phased out completely, realistically this isn't possible, especially in the UK where we have a very mild, damp climate which is conducive to weed growth. Until an alternative product is found, I believe that we cannot remove a necessary tool from the arsenal of farmers who cultivate vast areas of land. I would, however, like to see Member States give more encouragement and financial help to those farmers that wish to farm organically. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next speaker would be for the ENF group for 1 minute, Mr. Loiseau.
Oui, merci, Président.
Thank you, President. Well, we're talking about glyphosate, but what we're talking about is Monsanto, and also the fact that studies carried out on the product and its impact on the environment and people are not being released. The Chemicals Agency refused to classify this as carcinogenic, which meant it could stay on the market. And most farmers want to continue using it because it seems to be the only product that's effective for their needs. The precautionary principle may well mean that we have to ban it, but banning it wouldn't solve all the problems, and that is the heart of the problem. We need to try and find something to replace it with. There's no product that will substitute for it at the moment. So the real issue is to know which alternatives is the Commission working on. Could it be transparent with regard to credits given to research and the development of a substitute product? I think we need to listen to developers and farmers here, particularly because farmers are the ones who are the main users, because there's often no other choice. We need to find a viable alternative solution. Thank you.
Non-attached for 1 minute, Mr. James.
Mr. President and fellow colleagues, thank you very much. Well, decisions involve choice, and choice involves consequences. But the issue that I believe we're facing this afternoon is one of public confidence in the decisions that the European Union takes. And two of the issues that I have with what the Commissioner opened with, how can he stand there and make the points he did when the European Union expert body, the European Union Chemicals Agency, this year said should not be classified as a carcinogen? The WHO conclusion, potentially hazardous to human health, not conclusively hazardous to health. You know, we've got lots of products out there that are potentially, but we don't ban those. So we've got to draw a line somewhere in terms of being reasonable. Now, some of my colleagues have already highlighted, and others will, I'm sure, the issues, the consequences that will come of banning this particular product, and none of them are very, very positive for our farmers and for our agricultural business. Now, I've read quite widely issues about protecting wildlife. If the decision to ban this is to protect the environment, I'm for it, but not based on the flawed information we've heard.
Thank you. Now we will proceed with the speakers ad persona. Next would be Mr. Liese for 2 minutes.
President, Commissioner, colleagues, I would just like to say that following intensive discussions, this Parliament has established its own position on glyphosate and has adopted that position with a strong majority, unlike the Council, where many member states, even the one I come from, for political reasons ducked away from this, so there was no position adopted. That's something we need to build upon. And I would call upon the Commission to listen more closely today to what the Parliament has to say about this. There are problems with glyphosate. At the beginning, some of the representatives of the Commission said that you could drink it like water. That's wrong. We have to be careful with glyphosate. But if it's used carefully, if it's only used in specific areas, then for a limited period of time, the use of glyphosate is acceptable. That was something decided upon by the European Parliament, and a role in this was that there aren't many alternatives available right now. We need to conduct further research. We need to put more alternatives on the market, but that will take quite some time, and we can't immediately overnight switch to organic production in Europe. The Parliament has said a maximum of 7 years, not 10, not 15, a maximum of 7. We want more limitations as well, more than have been proposed by the Commission. And what's particularly important for me is that pre-harvest treatment is stopped. Very often what happened is that very quickly glyphosate is applied before the harvest so that the harvest is made easier. That's not acceptable. So, colleagues, we, as I say, have adopted this position with a strong majority. Let's continue to stand up for that. Don't wait for the Council, Commission, because the Council is not going to help you on this one. Go along with the Parliament.
For the sake of clarity, transparency and understanding, I need to say that due to time constraints, I will not be taking any blue card questions. Next would be Mr. Potts for 1 minute and a half.
Díky, pane předsedo, ale jenom abych ošetřil všechny přešlapy, které...
Thank you, President. Well, let me just emphasize that the Commission has made so many errors that I need 5 minutes to point them all out. The Commission had 20 minutes. But the fact is that we wanted this authorization to be for a maximum of 7 years, but the Commission didn't respect that. So that is a bit of a difference with regard to what the Commissioner said. Now, I recall this very, very well. I made a counter proposal to the Commission who wanted to authorize glyphosate for 15 years. These Monsanto papers are a scandal. There is a financial interest that the industry has in the results of these studies, and these have actually undermined our European system of authorizations. Why is there such an argument going on between the IARC and EFSA? Well, we know why. It's because IARC, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, use different statistics and use different kinds of data. They use academic studies, whereas our agency unfortunately uses data that comes from industry. That's why there is a difference. So no one can say with a clean conscience that glyphosate is safe. And neither can we say that all studies have been taken into consideration for its authorization. Following the Commission's intervention today, I'm firmly convinced that we need a parliamentary committee of inquiry on this, not only because of glyphosate, but because of the whole authorizations procedure.
Commissioner, we're asking farmers to meet the challenge of climate change and providing a growing world population with a reliable food supply. Only productive, competitive agriculture can do that, and the key is safe technology. So the message is absolutely clear. Public health is not negotiable, but farmers need every tool in the box. So this debate about glyphosate is going to be the first of many future technologies. And those debates have got to bring clarity, otherwise scientists aren't going to invest in technology. It's got to bring consistency, otherwise farmers can't plan their future. And it's got to bring confidence that the food we eat is safe. So any debate in the future about technology like glyphosate has to be balanced and has to be proportionate. And that means, Commissioner, the debate has to be about proven science, not about emotion.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Uitema for 1 minute.
Voorzitter, beste collega's.
Thank you very much indeed, President. Dear colleagues, this is about phytosanitary product authorizations, and this is about food safety. The national authorities make sure that all the scientific evidence takes into account and that all parties are heard. You know, there are bodies that have been set up to provide detailed independent report and to assess risks of certain substances. That's very important, because I think that science has to prevail in guiding us here, not our political positions. And the correspondence that's recently been published seems to question a number of studies financed by Monsanto. These studies were used to assess the risks of glyphosate, but to what extent are they reliable? I'd like to know. And what are the consequences to be drawn regarding our evaluation of the risk of glyphosate? We must absolutely follow the decision-making process critically. Perhaps we must improve it, but that does not necessarily mean we should be abandoning our confidence in science. The alternative would be to say one day yes, one day no, and that would just lead to confusion.
Ms. Hazekamp for 1 minute.
Ja, dank u wel, voorzitter. Al in 2015.
Thank you, President. In 2015, the WHO concluded that glyphosate was certainly carcinogenic. In the meantime, two European bodies, ECHA and EFSA, have tried to prove that that was not indeed the case. And the studies on which one of the two instances base itself comes from Monsanto, the producer of glyphosate. It seems impossible that not impossible that the results were dictated by Monsanto. You might wonder why it was possible that for so many years Monsanto was able to manipulate studies on its own products, but more important still is to establish why we are hearing now that the glyphosate authorization is going to be extended for a further 10 years. If you don't base yourself on studies which are public and not manipulated, you have no reason to continue to expose the environment, animals and human beings to glyphosate. Glyphosate has become a symbol of what's not working correctly in Europe. You, Commissioner, you have a further 6 months in order to use your own common sense, because otherwise I think really we need to change the situation in Europe.
Monsieur le Commissaire.
Commissioner, I'm concerned. For months now, Monsanto has been denigrating the UN agency, this International Agency for Research on Cancer. They're trying to stop these independent researchers speaking out. These recall Philip Morris's illegal and scandalous efforts to try and get people to believe that tobacco wasn't dangerous. The people who defended the tobacco industry are now defending Monsanto. The industry is now not allowed to appear at the WHO. The scientists have said that glyphosate is probably carcinogenic, but today the Commission is basing itself on these same studies which are calling for a ban, not to ban glyphosate. So why is it not being banned? Commissioner, I would call on you to establish a moratorium until we have full light on this situation, and perhaps take measures against Monsanto.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President. We believe that access to information and transparency are non-negotiable rights. It's therefore shocking that the dangerousness of a product such as glyphosate should be based on studies which have come from the same company that produces glyphosate. Also, picking out the data which is best suited to industry itself. It's shocking that every legitimate request for access to data is denied systematically because that data is deemed confidential. We want the entire regulatory system to be overhauled and rethought, because it will never be possible to have independent studies as long as it's industry itself that is financing the studies. I'm not only talking about herbicides, I'm also talking about animal feed, meat, milk, products derived from milk. We're talking about public health, and therefore it's a minimum to call for scientific assessments to be genuinely accessible, transparent and indeed independent.
Next, Mr. Jalk for 1 minute.
Commissioner, the renewal of the authorization for glyphosate for a further 10 years points to the limits of European regulation, which is struggling to find a substitute for this herbicide. The Monsanto papers raised the alarm over the reliability of private studies and their evidence of the influence that these big groups wield over political decision makers. This power dynamic places private interests over the public good, and the Bayer-Monsanto merger, which is envisaged for the end of this year, is a further threat, with a massive global group exercising even more influence over political decision making and imposing its vision of agriculture on farmers and countries in Europe. So what will the Commission clarify its position on this merger? Second problem concerns research here, particularly carried out by European universities and other public structures, where they are trying to find a satisfactory substitute for glyphosate through European research programs. In that sense, will the European Commission commission an impact study to look at other molecules and technologies available? The EU institution's very existence hinges on these initiatives.
Commissioner, I think it's unacceptable, totally unacceptable, that the Commission is going ahead with the authorization of glyphosate again, on the basis of data which has come from the company which actually produces the substance. It's not possible to cross-check that data. Monsanto has said that this information is confidential. The data in the study is basically should be public and needs to be checked. It needs to be checked because that's important for human health and also for the environment. We need independent laboratories that need to conduct the research before authorization is approved. It's crucial that obviously the data should be checked at European level because it's responsible for checking health. That way we'll be sending out a clear message that the European Union doesn't bow to the interests of the big concerns and is concerned about the protection of the environment.
Thank you very much, President, Commissioner, colleagues. Same issue, similar debate. I mean, are we really getting new information? ECHA has confirmed that glyphosate is not carcinogenic. I mean, that's not something new. I have faith in the work of ECHA and EFSA, and therefore it is quite right that the Commission has made their proposal for an unchanged act. I mean, I think that the Commission, however, should look more carefully at our 2016 resolution. We then said that we wanted to see glyphosate reauthorized for 7 years, but for limited uses. I think that would help us. For example, it shouldn't be used in kindergartens and in public spaces. I think, however, that farmers do need glyphosate, and the substances that they use basically don't yet have an alternative. I think politicians would be well advised to be less emotional here and base themselves more on scientific knowledge. But I think it's also right to support research here so that we can come up with alternatives to glyphosate. I hope that member states in the Council won't continue with the same performances that we've seen in recent years, and I hope that my country as well finally takes a clear position on this debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now Mrs. Guteland for 1 minute.
Herr ordförande.
President, how many people are living with the threat and fear of cancer on our continent? Our job has to be to make sure that fewer people are affected by this, and that's why it's irresponsible that the European Commission wants to continue to allow the sale of a substance which the IARC and other bodies internationally have classified as a possible carcinogen. The EU legislation has to be underpinned by the precautionary principle. It must apply in this case. We're talking about people's health. Glyphosate is in very widespread use in agriculture around the world, and the uncertainty that prevails in terms of how it affects public health is extremely worrying and serious. And I think the Commission has also been quite weak in handling its responsibility for people's health in other areas, such as substances that cause hormonal problems. And now we're talking about people being at risk of cancer. A number of people have touched on this already, but there are issues as to how EFSA has reacted in this affair and the responsibility that they have in this whole case.
Okay. Dziękuję bardzo, Pani Przewodnicząca.
Thank you, President. I have many years of experience in medicine, dealing with scientific facts, and sponsored scientific studies is considered a problem. Monsanto may be saying one thing, but glyphosate is still just a little biodegradable, and we can find its byproducts in the blood of newborn babies. And also the trace amounts of glyphosate was found in, for example, in shots against many common diseases. Also, some UN organizations' agendas are now suspicious of this substance. It may actually be responsible for hormone disruptions and many other diseases. This could actually lead to a new scientific cycle.
Torres Martinez for 1 minute.
Si la Comisión Europea.
Yes, well, the Commission is extending the authorization for the use of glyphosate for another decade, but you know what's going to happen. What's going to happen is that the citizens are going to be even more aware that the EU is dominated by agro-industry lobbies and that people's health isn't something they care about. Now, this authorization is based on studies sponsored by Monsanto, and the conclusion of them is that there's no evidence to consider this substance carcinogenic. I mean, I think you need to go further than these kinds of studies. Ask people who live near places where glyphosate is used how things are going. We've already said this several times. We cannot play around with the health of our people. If the Commission once again ignores the precautionary principle, it will be clear that these institutions are not in the service of their citizens, but they're in the service of multinationals. It will show that the European Union is in the service of big business. It damages the environment, endangers our health, and will even prevent us breathing clean air in the European Union. Ban glyphosate.
We do have time limit, not just for any reason, but especially as we are on time constraints. I think we should show collegiality also to those that will be speaking on other items later in the evening, and we do have a time limit, so please do respect it. Mr. Hausling, for 1 minute, please.
Ja, Herr Kommissar, ich dachte eigentlich, bei uns geht.
Commissioner, the precautionary principle should apply. There are doubts which continue to exist on glyphosate, but you're sweeping them under the carpet. You're ignoring them. You're ignoring the fact that with these studies, some of the studies, basically they haven't even been checked. These are just studies that have been drawn up by industry. So we have to think very carefully whether the checking procedure that we have actually conforms with most recent standards. Now, looking at these Monsanto papers from the United States, surely you should start doubting about whether Monsanto has actually manipulated this whole procedure, just to say it nicely, basically. So what's the idea? No limits on glyphosate, not even for pre-harvest procedures. What about the question of biodiversity? You're saying, okay, business as usual, let's just carry on. I'm sorry, that just cannot be the case. You're also ignoring the fact that almost a million people have signed up to get a debate in the European Parliament. You've ignored that completely as well, and that is just not democratic.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, I want to ask you a direct question. Don't you personally believe that it would be better to exclusively use proper public peer-reviewed studies to base your decision on authorization on? So, because we are authorizing a product that is at least potentially dangerous. I think this is what people are asking us to do. European citizens, I mean here. This is really the only path that we should be taking in the future to restore credibility to European institutions which we represent. In addition, I would like to ask you a further question. If glyphosate is banned, well, I wouldn't like other, even more dangerous, more toxic substances to be authorized. For example, those that are created for various genetically modified substances. For example, a substance that was also part of Agent Orange in Vietnam. Thank you.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, can I say thank you for your very detailed opening to this debate, and I think we owe it to you to read the detail and study it, because there was quite a lot of information in this. I think it's also important to point out, because there seems to be some confusion about what glyphosate is. It is a weed killer, not a pesticide, and I think that is an important point. Secondly, to those who say we can do without it, hands up those in this chamber who will go out and weed the fields, because there are very few of you who will do it. I used to do it as a child, and that's a long, long time ago. And I think we need to be mindful of the possibilities or the options for farmers who need it. But I'm looking in the gallery here, and when I go into a garden centre in anywhere in Europe, I see wall-to-wall glyphosate products, because gardeners across Europe use this product. This is a debate that's worth having. Monsanto, I think, is on trial here, and I'm happy for Monsanto to be on trial, as is GM technology. But I do think we need to be careful about the other issues and agencies that are on trial here, the Food Safety Agency and the Chemicals Agency. We do have to have trust in these agencies. I would be deeply troubled if this chamber became the authorisation place for any product. But I do believe this chamber should be where we debate these issues, and that's why I welcome the debate, but I'm concerned about some of the comments that have been made, because this is an important part of the technology, as has been said, that farmers used. If I believed that there was a problem, I would call for a ban as well. However, IARC is out of step with all of the other agencies that have looked at this product, and we need to acknowledge that. So perhaps, Commissioner, when we analyse the information you have given us and follow up, as many of us will, with some questions, there will be greater clarity on this issue. However, I think many of us come to this debate with closed minds. Mine is slightly open to science. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Paolucci, for 1 minute, please.
Sì, grazie, signor Presidente.
Thank you, President. I have to be honest, Commissioner. You haven't convinced me at all. You've missed a crucial point. It's not the dangerous extremists and the horrible environmentalists, but people from courts who've questioned these fraudulent comments left in doubt, where there's a lot of pressure as well. I trust science, but I do not trust people who manipulate scientific research to draw benefit from them. And that's why we need clarity. That's why we need a commission of inquiry. And that's why, in the absence of this clarity, then this 10-year authorization will be a slap in the face of the precautionary principle.
Thank you. And next, for 1 minute, Mr. de Mesmaeker.
Ja, vorig jaar stemde ik tegen de
Last year I voted against the extension of the glyphosate authorization. So the key question is to know whether or not it was carcinogenic, but there was no scientific consensus at the time. I wanted more transparency and independent science. That continues to be my position. The fact that Monsanto may have manipulated or influenced certain studies only strengthens my appeal for more transparency, and it's up to the Commission now to show that it is able to react. I am in favour of a policy based on scientific evidence, and I'd ask the Commission, how are you going to guarantee that kind of policy, and how are you going to be more transparent on this? However, I have an open mind, and we could possibly envisage a modification of the authorization system for herbicides and pesticides. We are in favour of deeper analysis of the professional use of glyphosate as well. So I hope that the Commission and this House will do more to protect public health and the environment, that we will have clear answers forthcoming. Thank you.
Herr Kommissar.
Commissioner, in March 2015, the IARC came to the conclusion that glyphosate could be carcinogenic. Just 6 months later, EFSA came to the conclusion that it was unlikely. So there are two different conclusions with regard to these health risks, and this has led to uncertainty and mistrust among the people. And in addition to that, you have the fact that the only study carried out by EFSA hasn't been fully published. So therefore there's a suspicion that Monsanto could be involved in it. Commissioner, to restore trust, only full transparency will do. We're talking about the health of people here. So we cannot simply bow down before industry or farmers. I would call on your conscience to ensure that we base ourselves on the precautionary principle. Thank you.
Mr. Rope for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, colleagues, the so-called Monsanto papers gave rise to scandalous allegations. Is it possible that the EU's executive agencies such as EFSA and ECHA not only implement the EU law, but also follow the instructions of Monsanto? I wouldn't like to believe that. However, admittedly, these allegations are confirmed by the two agencies' stubborn position, which they maintain that glyphosates are not harmful to human health and that they are breaking down quickly. I believe that this scandal will serve as a wake-up call to the Commission, that it will take a more responsible stance on substances potentially harmful to humans. Assessment should be made by scientists rather than officials. The findings should be unambiguous, publicly available, verifiable by the scientific community. Thank you.
Mr. Agnew, you have 1 minute and a half.
For 40 years, we've been using this material in Britain very successfully. The British authorities were quite happy to pass it for safety under the risk-based assessment. The EU likes to use the hazard-based assessment. Of course, anything can be a hazard. The salt and pepper we put on our food. It's the degree that counts. The Canadian authorities have crawled all over glyphosate. They can't find anything wrong with it. And of course, over these 40 years, we've had canaries in the mine. These are the people, the sprayer operators who handle this, the concentrated material. Now, there would be queues in doctor surgeries if there was a problem here, but there aren't queues in doctor surgeries. The Health and Safety Executive in Britain, who look at accidents on farms, they see far more problems with falling from heights, getting tangled in machinery, drowning in slurry, drowning in grain. Exposure to pesticides is way down their list. And of course, the World Health Organization says this material is no more carcinogenic than sitting in front of a log fire, cutting human hair, working night shifts, being exposed to dry cleaning fluid, or drinking the Argentinian drink mate. The WHO say this material is far less carcinogenic than drinking coffee, drinking alcohol, or eating processed meat. We are being very, very silly here. The burden of proof is obviously on the manufacturers, and they've always got in mind the thalidomide scandal. It costs now €200 million to get a material through this process, and 9 years. Only a large company can afford to do it. The Green lobby are determined to kill agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Lukaczewska for 2 minutes.
President, our health to a large extent depends on the quality of food that we eat and also on the environment. Therefore, I think that it is of paramount importance that all the substances that we use in agriculture, also for food production, present no doubt whatsoever. Today we are discussing a glyphosate, a herbicide, which is most commonly used everywhere in the world. And if you look at the number of cases of cancer, and also the number of bees is falling, but also looking at the scandals alleged to Monsanto, there are many doubts, and there are reasons to be concerned. Last year I put a question to the Commission concerning the negative impact of glyphosate on the human health, also health of animals. This could be a cause of genotoxicity, a carcinogenic character, and so on. And the Commission responded that there is the carcinogenity of the substance is doubtful. However, this contradicts the WHO's opinion, which states that the glyphosate may be carcinogenic. So where does this discrepancies come from in terms of your reply to my question? Consumers are awaiting a clear-cut answer, particularly farmers, since glyphosate is to be given a green light. And as consumers, we need to have certainty that this is a safe product and that the scientific study cycle has not been financed by the producer itself. Monsanto is a producer of Roundup.
Mrs. Kadenbach for 1 minute.
Sehr geehrter Herr Vorsitzender.
President, Commissioner, in the past we thought you were a very responsible person who thought seriously about things, and in his decisions always said that decisions had to be based on our conscience, that they have to stand up to empirical research. And that's why I'm calling on you right now, please, to act on that basis, because what we have before us, what's given rise to this decision of the 10-year extension, is something that can't be relied upon, because we don't know how these studies have been produced. We've in the past had studies which have claimed that yes, there is a risk, others didn't see that risk. Now, if there is serious doubt about these studies, that they are really correct, transparent and honest, and if there are serious doubts as to whether or not they are reliable, then you cannot take these studies as a basis for your decision. So please think about this once again. The Parliament's position of a maximum of 7 years was as far as this should really be taken. Thank you.
Seit März wissen wir, dass Monsanto.
Since March, we have known that Monsanto lies and has done worst things. They've used the worst kinds of secret services methods. They've followed a UN agency researcher, and in the United States with Trump, they've tried to ensure that the funding is cut to this UN agency just because this agency has independent scientists. And what's the Commission been doing since the Monsanto leaks? Well, they've been carrying on as before, a 10-year extension to the authorization. I mean, why are we interested in this file as Greens? Well, this relates to the credibility of Europe. That's why we wrote letters back in March. That's why we're going to the European Court of Justice to clarify which studies were made accessible. This is not only about health. It's not only about agriculture. This relates to trust in Europe.
Thank you very much. Good evening. And now Mr. Sean Kelly. Please go ahead, sir.
Yes, I see you.
2 minutes?
Oui.
Merci. I have listened to this debate. I heard Miriam Dalli outline the case against glyphosate, and I listened to the Commissioner very carefully when he answered. And I think that on balance, the Commissioner is correct. Because if one reputable agency said glyphosate was safe, then you'd be inclined to say, this is an independent agency, they say it is safe, so you should go along with it. But when 2 agencies say it is safe, then I think to actually go against them, and especially to ask for a ban, does not make much sense to me. I have spoken to many farmers, horticulturalists, etc. about this. They are deeply concerned, and I think before you should talk about any ban, you should have an impact assessment on what the effects are going to be. Are we going to allow the weeds to destroy the tillage farmers' crops? The same for the horticulturalists, the same for our gardens, when glyphosate has been used for many decades and for all intents and purposes seems to be safe. We have, of course, to take public concerns into consideration. We have to allay people's fears, but we can do so in a practical and logical manner. And as the Commissioner pointed out, it isn't just European agencies. Agencies around the world have said similarly. So I think that this is an overreaction. We certainly have to be careful. We certainly have to be prudent, and we have to allay, as I said, people's fears. But in relation to Monsanto, they do not own the rights anymore. They produce it. There's a company in Ireland that produces and sells it. They've been doing it for many years. Are we going to suddenly say, sorry folks, fold up the tent, your business is gone? Not the way to go ahead. Come on, go Trump.
Bardzo dziękuję, panie Kelly.
Thank you. Christa Schaldemose, take the floor for 1 minute.
Thank you. So here we are again with the glyphosate case, the case that will not die. You in the Commission, you're saying there's no problem, science has spoken, everything is safe. Still, you say that member states must make a big effort to restrict the use of glyphosate in parks and private gardens and so on and so forth. You wouldn't do that if you didn't think there were any worries at all concerning the substance. What I think we need is a clear plan from the Commission. We need for you to make a plan for how to phase out glyphosate. We need for you to make a plan for how we can ensure there is transparency and credibility in regard to the authorities that will assess substances we use in the EU. We also need a clear plan and funding when it comes to how we can find alternative pesticides so we can get rid of glyphosate and Roundup. We do not need to use it. We need to find other substances. It is dangerous to continue. Please produce a plan.
Bardzo dziękuję, pani Schaldemose.
Thank you. Mr. Machalesi.
Gracias. Thank you very much indeed, President. Glyphosate is, according to the WHO, a substance which is possibly carcinogenic, which could damage our health. And despite that, the EFSA agency, for a year now, has been refusing to publish studies on glyphosate. And as such, the Greens are being very active on this, and we think this is very serious, and we're taking this to the European Court of Justice. We think the data should be transparent. We think the experts should be able to work with scientific rigor and know that Monsanto has played a role in this process. In the meantime, nearly 1 million people are asking for the banning of glyphosate through a European Citizens Initiative. So, please, can we have common sense from the European Commission, a ban on glyphosate and an independent and transparent investigation into this substance? This is a basic request for a proper democratic debate so that we can look into how our farming system works and protect our health. Thank you.
Bardzo dziękuję, panie Marcellesi. Następnym...
Mr. Emil Radev. 1.5 minutes.
Благодаря, господин председател. Уважаеми колеги, въпросът за употребата на най-широко
Thank you, President. Well, the question of the use of the most common herbicide in the world, glyphosate, is very topical. And on the 31st of December 2017, its mandate is going to come to an end. Glyphosate is used intensively right now, not only in agriculture, but also to treat parks and public spaces. A broad range of people, therefore, are affected by this product, not only farmers, but also the final users of agricultural products. We all know that glyphosate is highly controversial because studies have been produced which show that it creates damage to the digestive tract, deformed fetuses, and other problems to humans and animals. There are no studies which support its genotoxicity or against it, but glyphosate is used throughout the world. Therefore, even if the use of glyphosate were to be limited here in the European Union, that does not mean that our citizens would no longer be exposed. And that's why it's crucial that the member states should have specific, clear data about the use of products and the impact of that use on human and animal health. Thank you.
Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you. Mr. Tarabella.
Monsieur le Commissaire, comme vous,
Commissioner, like you, we have to put our trust in science, and politicians have to base themselves on science to take decisions. But for a long time, asbestos was known as safe. Scientists said it was safe, but thousands of people are dying all across the world. There are also other substances that are in the same boat. Scientists said that glyphosate as well was safe, but the Monsanto papers that emerged in March suggested that scientists had doctored the results to ensure that glyphosate could come onto the market. So we can doubt the scientific results that we're getting, and therefore, as a result of that, we need to ensure that there is full transparency, and we need to ensure that the scientific studies that are used are fully reliable. So we need to ensure we have the whole truth so that we can be sure that our system is reliable. We're talking about the health of 500 million Europeans and 7 billion citizens right across the planet. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Melior.
Dziękuję, Vice President. Verehrter Herr Kommissar, verehrte Kollegen.
Commissioner, colleagues, well, we've exchanged a lot of arguments, but I can't go along with all of them. But I can go along with many of them. I'd like to thank you, Commissioner, in particular for your lengthy response at the start of this debate here in the Parliament. But I think basically that we have to reproach ourselves very seriously, and this is a reproach of the European agencies, EFSA and ECHA, and the question of the studies which were drawn up by Monsanto itself. That reproach has to be clarified, particularly in the interests of our own European agencies. That's why we have to debate that here. That's why we have to argue amongst ourselves here as well and ensure that we go about this in a much better way in the future. As Frédéric Ries has already said, this also involves making sure that the agencies we have in Europe are equipped in such a way that they can do their...
Thank you. Mr. Parnell.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, I understand your probity, and I understand and recognize your expertise and your will for us to work together, your will to protect public health in Europe. But here, in this case, there's a real urgency, and you're taking, you need to take an initiative in the next few months to protect people before the autumn, that is, so that we'll protect European citizens in the run-up to these revelations on endocrine disruptors. And there's also an urgency with regard to the concerns that exist on the lack of transparency. EFSA's opinion should have been underpinned by studies, apparently were underpinned by studies sponsored by the agrochemicals industry. So, before the member states actually take their decisions in the autumn, I really hope that the new French minister, Nicolas Hulot, will stick to his word in terms of what he said in April. He said that, yes, we have to take the right amount of responsibility and protect the health of European citizens, and we should ban the renewed authorization of glyphosate, given the rising concerns that have played out. Thank you.
Bardzo dziękuję, panie Parniu.
Thank you. Mr. Shani.
Köszönöm szépen a szót, elnök úr. Magam is egyet.
Thank you, President. I agree with those who believe that the health of EU citizens is of paramount importance, and that is why I am glad that this controversial topic is now on our agenda. I'd like us to adopt a reasonable approach. A scandal from America cannot undermine our trust in the two EU agencies. While this was a protected product, the issue was never raised. I believe that the precautionary principle is important. Every poison is a poison, but a regulated use can reduce the harm. Of course, we have to limit the use of these chemicals, but a total ban is not to be envisaged either. So I believe in informing farmers, and I would like the Commission to guarantee the 100% reliability of procedure.
Thank you. Now we move on to the Catch the Eye. We have 8 requests for the floor. Please make sure that you stick to the 1-minute limit. Mr. Faria.
Sr. Presidente. Sr. Comissário, o senhor é médico e, portanto, vai compreender o que lhe vou dizer.
President Commissioner, well, you're a doctor, so you'll understand this. Glyphosate is the most widely used herbicide in the world. 70% of its use is in forest agriculture and in gardens. Glyphosate is in water, in the human body, and in our foodstuffs. The WHO has said that this herbicide is carcinogenic, and that's been seen in particular in animals and laboratories. It has negative effects on phytoplankton as well, which is at the very start of the food chain. The Commission now has to guarantee the independence and transparency of the authorization process for pesticides and herbicides in order to try and rule out all doubt. Now, we should not have these contradictory studies either, or conflicts of interest either, which have been revealed in this case. We have to be able to base ourselves on scientific data, and we have to bear in mind that glyphosates could indeed be carcinogenic and could be endocrine disruptors. Therefore, the Commission should not renew the use of glyphosate. We have to protect the environment and public health. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm asking you again, please make sure that you stick to the 1-minute limit as we're running a time delay of 20 minutes. Mr. Caputo.
Un minuto, prego.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President. Well, it's not the first time that we've discussed glyphosate in this House, and I get the feeling it's not the last time either. The recent publication of the Monsanto papers has made reasonable doubts emerge with regard to the credibility of some studies that Monsanto has sponsored. And these are part of the documentary evidence that ECHA and EFSA have used as the basis of their studies and conclusions. Now we have the possibility that this substance will be reauthorized for a decade, in spite of the fact that campaigns have been launched in all member states to try and get it banned. The Commission needs to recover credibility in the eyes of European citizens on this issue. You need to provide more information with regard to Monsanto's involvement before any kind of authorization comes into play. We need credible scientific studies. That's extremely important. The European Union has a duty to provide an appropriate response to the legitimate concerns of millions of consumers. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Marias.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, I listened carefully to what you had to say. You spoke for 19 minutes, probably the longest speech made by a commissioner here in this hemicycle. And I'm here very often, actually. Now, but your speech gave rise to more questions and answers in my head, as we've heard from a lot of my colleagues here. Because if there is no risk with glyphosate, why are specific methods taken when this is applied near children? Why, if there are no problems, should member states ban it? Obviously, we have to really ensure that people are protected, because from the Monsanto papers it's become clear that the glyphosate is carcinogenic. Monsanto, as you know, merged with Bayer at the start of the year. So why should this doubted substance be used when we've heard also from the WHO, which has said that it's carcinogenic? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sinadinos.
Well, there was a problem, I think, with the Commissioner's speech. Glyphosate, according to the WHO, is clearly carcinogenic. And we've heard also complaints about the marketing of glyphosate in an aggressive way. And obviously people want to make easy money on this, so they're hiding the data as a result of it. Following a decision taken, I think, particularly by the ECHA, we have to bear in mind what the situation here is. We have to protect human health, we have to protect the environment, and that means that there has to be access to data, not only to get the results that the companies involved want. Basically, we need more science and less politics in all of this. We have to ensure that we produce the results and that we can protect our societies. We need, obviously, to monitor the levels of glyphosate in our water and in foodstuffs as well before we can come up with a sustainable solution on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bogovič will take the floor.
Hvala za besedo. Sem sadjar iz Slovenije, ki že 25 let uporabljam glifosat, in če je komu do tega, da bi vedel.
Thank you very much. Well, we want to know the truth about glyphosate, and we certainly don't want to see anyone poisoned. I mean, in the work that they do, the institutions need to be respected. Now we have the EFSA and ECHA reports. The latter confirms the former. Also, many international agencies say that there's no danger in glyphosate. I've also read that glyphosate isn't carcinogenic, according to a UN agency, whereas another UN agency says that it's dangerous if you also consume red meat. So we have to first and foremost protect health. That is what we have to do. We have to ensure that there's protection for farmers as well, and agriculture.
Thank you. Ms. Aguilera.
Nieobecna.
She seems to be absent.
Muchas gracias, Presidente.
Thank you very much indeed, President, and thank you, Commissioner, for your very extensive explanation. You spoke for nearly 20 minutes, and a lot of the people who've intervened haven't listened to you, and nor will they stay to the end of the debate. They came with their pre-established idea for their moment of glory to define a position that was a political one. And this is really what's happening with this whole affair. The International Agency for Research on Cancer said that the formula that was mixed with glyphosate was a substance that could actually cause cancer, and if you remove that formula, then there wouldn't be a problem with the glyphosate or cancer. And it committed to the idea that they would use that information to make a decision on whether or not to ban the product, and they would take into account the European Parliament. Now, I have trust in you, Commissioner, and in the European institutions, and I trust in EFSA on food safety. So there are political games at play here, and we have to be very careful about that. Obviously, we have to be careful about Monsanto as well, but they have become the scapegoat here vis-à-vis, the general position on herbicides overall. So there's a massive political manipulation going on here.
Thank you.
Van Orden.
Mr. Van Orden.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I've listened very intently to this debate, and I just want to say that, of course, we all want a healthy countryside and a good environment for us all to live in. So do our farmers. No one in this House has a monopoly of virtue in this particular matter. And our farmers are responsible farmers. And I represent the east of England, which is a major agricultural sector in the United Kingdom. Our responsible farmers rely, of course, on good scientific, evidence-based information for what they're doing. And from what I've heard from the Commission this afternoon, that's exactly what we have. I hope that the Commission will bring an end to all the uncertainty on this and confirm once and for all the authorization for glyphosates. It's been very clear. We're hearing repetitions of the same sort of scaremongering, the same things. And I think, listen again to what the Commissioner had to say. Look more closely at what he said to us all. So let's put an end to all this nonsense, and let's give certainty to our farmers, our responsible farmers. Thank you.
Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Van Orden. And finally, within the Catch the Eye procedure, Ms. Catch.
Mr. President, from the institutions whose work is financed by taxpayers of the member states, I expect transparency, credibility and trust. This is true of EFSA and ECHA as well. These agencies have to provide citizens of the Union with a high quality of life without risks for health from products that they use every day. The publication of the Monsanto papers in the proceedings before U.S. courts that are prominent in the media in the last few months and is related to over 60 court actions for the disruption of health and the appearance of non-Hodgkin lymphoma related with the use of the active substance glyphosate in plant protection products. This has undermined the credibility of American agencies due to doubts regarding the trustworthiness of these studies. This is especially concerning because these studies were also the basis for the safety of glyphosate before European institutions. I expect a swift answer and proposals to improve the procedures.
Thank you very much.
Hvala lijepa.
Pana komisarza Vytenisa Andriukaitisa.
I'd like to give the floor to Commissioner Andriukaitis.
Panie Przewodniczący, to bardzo miło. President, honourable members, let me start with thanking all of you because you put a lot of questions on the table. But I have no chance to address those questions, as you know, to comment because we have no time. But may I draw your attention? In my hands, it's WHO report, WHO, because many of you quote WHO IARC agency. Okay, here is my IARC report also. I have both reports. IARC and WHO joint meeting on pesticide residues. Two agencies, one and another. Then they decided, because it is the final decision, that glyphosate is unlikely carcinogenic. When you are mentioning WHO, please read all documents together. Otherwise, you will repeat a working group and very active Professor Porter, who was chairman of working group. I met him, we discussed together. I was in Lyon, we have a lot of discussions. I visited all agencies, ECHA, EFSA, because I am not responsible to be judge on science, colleagues. And I think that you all are not judges on science. It means that we will understand that we have our framework of actions, and framework is law. You mentioned Monsanto papers, but it is enshrined in law that Monsanto is obliged to present study review, because it's enshrined in law. Such law was adopted here in this House together with Council. My question is, I am responsible to follow law, because rule of law is my basic area to act. And I would like to say to you very openly that we have very precautionary approach, but don't mix precautionary approach and precautionary principle. And we do the same. We have precautionary approach, and then we use precautionary principle. We ask after EFSA. We ask ECHA to analyze. And today we have, at EU level, we have all agencies. We have no chance to move. Only 28 member states agencies, they did the same. ECHA did the same. EFSA did the same. That's all, colleagues. We have no chance to then. Please don't ask me to present another scientific view. I would like to present to you scientific view in very detailed explanation. But because IARC and WHO is not European Union agencies, they are global agencies. But we take into account those outcomes also. Please tell me, how can I act in this situation? My answer is very simple. I would like to follow only plant protection products legislation. Otherwise, I will be in dangerous situation. Okay? I can show you all materials. I have a lot of meetings with my colleagues from Social Democratic Group. I have a lot of meetings with Greens. I know very well that you have your own approaches. Here you see Monsanto Tribunal paper. Here you see urine test. Here you see a lot of 7 reasons why we can ban glyphosate. Colleagues, it's about politics. It's not about science. But I read it very carefully. Because some write very rightly. It will be good to ban glyphosate because it is very good momentum to promote organic farming. I am not against to promote organic farming, but sorry, but it's not about science. It's about your political platform, okay? I respect your political platform. But I would like to follow instruments which are in our hands. I know that scientists have a little bit different approach. Professor Porter has one approach. John Little, he sent to me a letter today. And and a lot of their working groups people are very active discussing. Okay, we will continue those scientific discussions. I welcome those discussions. It will be good to organize scientific debates and move forward, but we must follow our legal obligations. And I would like to say very openly, I am ready to fulfill my legal obligations. And when I started with in 2014, I had doubts because I listened to you, and I had doubts about our European Union system. Today I would like to say very openly, let me reiterate that I firmly believe that European Union system concerning the approval of active substances to be used in plant protection products is robust, trustworthy, and ensures the highest safety standards for human and animal health and the environment. And it's true, colleagues. I spent 2.5 years. But I would like to say that today I am a big believer in our European Union safety system. Please follow me. I would like to invite you to organize debates once again, address those issues in more detailed way. Of course, we know very well that glyphosate is not, I don't know who is repeating that I said that glyphosate I can drink glyphosate as a glass of water. Sorry, I never told you such a situation, because I would like to mention that I mentioned, glyphosate is as you know, is labeled with the hazard classification: corrosive, causes serious eye damages, and hazardous to environment, toxic to aquatic life, with long-lasting effects. It is on label. Okay, we need to move forward and to see how to manage situation, how to keep our instruments to guarantee levels, hazard approach, risk approach, and then to fulfill our obligations and, of course, also finalize our decisions. Otherwise, it will be very difficult. Please look, we saw the consequences of ignoring science and EFSA conclusions in the field of plant health. Now we have an entire region infected by Xylella in Puglia. Can you imagine disaster in Puglia? But you have no treatment. No treatment, only possibilities to remove trees. And the same and those who attacked EFSA proposal, remove those trees. Today, they do not listen to me what is happening today in Puglia. But scientific advice was clear. And speaking about scientific conclusions about glyphosate, we have today conclusions built by ECHA. And then I have legal obligations, colleague, 6 months or till finish of this year. I know that it's only me who will follow rule of law. But I would like to fulfill my obligations. And sorry to say, speaking about idea to have inquiry committee, please do it. I will be more than happy to look at your inquiry compared to Monsanto papers. Please do it, because it will be very good to cooperate with you. And from Commission side, we have no grounds to start with inquiry procedure. But may parliamentarians have a little bit more space for maneuver? Please do it. I will be more than happy to communicate, to coordinate our common knowledges and to present to you all picture. Sorry, friends, but I would like to say that Commission approach is very clear, based on science, based on precautionary principles. I am a medical doctor, colleagues. And I know how it is difficult to encourage my patients to use in proper way medicines. You always know how it is difficult to manage medicines. But without medicine, you have no chance to move forward. And I know that some of you have idea to propose in EU glyphosate-free agriculture. Yes, please do it. Please organize pilot project, encourage farmers to do it, but it's not up to me. It's not up to science. Friends, sorry to say, but I am very happy to listen to you very carefully. Sorry, but I do not touch all questions about transparency because I have answers about transparency. I discuss those issues in very detailed manner together with EFSA, together with ECHA, together with IARC, together with those working group. And I think that we will see possibilities after effort move forward, but we will do it together. You know, you are also responsible on risk management and risk communication, because those messages which are disseminated today, they create distrust. We live in a very difficult society when distrust in science creates a lot of problems. Doesn't matter, medicines, vaccinations, or plant protection products. It is a very dangerous way to blame each other. I would like to be very happy to be scapegoat, bad guy. But sorry to say, I have only one way. I count on my teams, I count on DG Sante, I count on our specialists, I count on our scientists around the world. A lot of scientific community which presented common picture. And only few create a lot of problems. Sorry to say, friends, but I would like to be more than happy to move forward together with you, responding to all your questions, but I trust in science. Thank you.
Panie komisarzu.
Well, thank you very much, Commissioner Andriukaitis. It's evident that your speech has shown that you've listened to 32 speakers. This was a genuine debate. I'm not sure whether you will have persuaded everyone here, but I am absolutely certain that everyone here will be satisfied that they took place in a genuine exchange of views. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is a statement by the Vice President of the Commission and the High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy on the situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo. On behalf of Ms. Federica Mogherini, I would like to welcome Mr. Stylianides here.